Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a major new law that's basically rewriting the rulebook for the internet in the UK. And it's all about a fundamental question.
It seems like a simple question, but the answer is incredibly complicated. People have been arguing about it for years. Well, the Online Safety Act is the UK's attempt to give a clear answer. It's the platforms themselves. Let's break down how it's supposed to work.
So here's our game plan. We're going to walk through the exact four-step process that platforms now have to follow. We'll start with how they profile themselves, then assess the potential for harm, implement safety measures, and finally, how they have to keep reviewing everything. And at the end, we'll get into what this all really means for us, the users. Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty. The Online Safety Act isn't just a friendly suggestion, it's a huge shift. It puts what's called a legal duty of care on these online services. In plain English, that means they are now legally on the hook to protect their users from illegal content. And here's the absolute key: the paper trail. The Act forces platforms to create and keep super detailed written records. So they can't just say, oh yeah, we're keeping you safe. They have to prove it by documenting every risk they find and exactly what they're doing about it. So where does this all start? Well, the very first thing any platform has to do is take a good long look in the mirror. Before they can figure out their risks, they need to define and declare exactly what kind of service they are. The good news for them is they don't have to start from scratch. The UK's communications regulator, a group called Ofcom, has created these things called risk profiles. You can think of them as a really detailed checklist that helps a service pinpoint all the potential risks just based on how it's built. So the first question is pretty basic. What kind of service are you? I mean, a gaming platform is going to have totally different risks than, say, an online marketplace, right? This first step is all about putting yourself in the right category, because that sets the stage for everything else.
And then it gets way more specific. For example, can your users be anonymous? That's a huge deal. It completely changes how people might behave, so it has to be noted down as a big potential risk factor.
The same goes for different features. Think about live streaming. It's immediate, it's unedited, it's happening in real time. That presents a whole different world of safety challenges compared to just a static blog post. Every single feature adds another layer to the risk profile. And this is where it gets really interesting. Features that are designed for our privacy, like closed groups or encrypted messages, can actually make it way harder to moderate content. So the Act says platforms have to think about how these private spaces could be misused and bake that right into their assessment. All right, so once a service has its detailed profile all figured out, the next step is to get down to business and systematically figure out the potential for harm. And they do this using a classic risk matrix. For every possible bad thing that could happen, they have to ask two questions. First, how likely is it that this kind of illegal content will show up on our site? And second, if it does show up, how bad would the impact be? You combine those two, and you get your risk level. Anything from, no big deal, to this is a huge problem. And the Act is super specific here. It doesn't just say, look out for bad stuff. It actually names 17 types of priority illegal content that need their own separate, really deep risk assessment. This is to make sure the worst stuff gets the most attention. And we're talking about a really wide range of things here, all the most serious online harms. Everything from terrorism and child abuse material to hate content, financial scams, and content about illegal weapons. Every one of those 17 categories needs its own dedicated game plan. So, after all that profiling and assessing and list making, now it's finally time to do something. This is the part where the platform has to decide on and actually put in place real concrete safety measures to handle the risks they found. And they have a choice to make. They can take the easy route and just use all the safety measures that Ofcom recommends, or they can try to invent their own alternative measures. But if they go their own way, they're the ones who have to prove that their solution actually works. And here's the real balancing act. If a platform decides to build its own safety system, its written records have to spell out exactly how that system does its job, while also protecting fundamental rights like freedom of expression and privacy. It's a really tricky tightrope to walk between safety and liberty. Now, you might think once they've done all that, they're finished, right? Nope, not even close. The Act sees online safety as a never-ending cycle of getting better. It's not a one-and-done job. The really important thing to get is that this is a loop. They have to report what they find, Keep an eye on how well their safety measures are actually working, constantly look out for new risks, and then use all that info to update their entire assessment. Then they do it all over again.
This means that risk assessment isn't some dusty file that just sits on a shelf. It's a living document. It has to be officially looked at least once a year. And just as important, it has to be reviewed before any big changes happen to the service, like launching a new feature. This basically forces safety to be part of the design process, not just an afterthought.
Okay, so we've just walked through a whole lot of steps and assessments and records. It sounds pretty bureaucratic, doesn't it? So the big question is, what does all this paperwork actually mean for you and me when we're just scrolling online?
Well, here's why it's a big deal. The Act forces a shift from just cleaning up messes after they happen to actively trying to prevent them in the first place. It makes platforms write down their safety decisions, which creates that paper trail for regulators to check. The whole point is to create a more consistent and transparent level of safety, no matter what site you're on. Which, of course, brings us to the ultimate question at the heart of all this. The entire law is built on one big idea: that forcing platforms to write everything down and justify their choices will create a safer online world for all of us. Whether this mountain of new rules and records will actually deliver on that promise, well, that's the great experiment we're all about to watch unfold.